Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump sending over 1,000 active troops to the southern border. The deployment comes after Trump signed multiple executive orders to expand border security. What the troops might be doing there and how this builds on Trump's latest executive orders. A shooting at a Nashville high school kills one and wounds another. What we know about the situation so far. Trump's nominee for director of the Office of Management and Budget faces a partisan vote after Democratic leadership vows opposition. Leaders on Capitol Hill speak to press for the first time after President Trump's inauguration and flurry of executive actions. Republicans portraying optimism, previewing their next steps. Democrats railing against Trump's actions as unhelpful to Americans. We have the details. Secretary of State Marco Rubio outlines new initiatives for the State Department, closing down some programs while emphasizing others. Jack Bradley reports on the latest changes.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Troops being deployed, President Trump is dispatching over 1,000 active duty service members to the southern border. It comes 2 days after he signed a slew of executive orders to crack down on illegal immigration. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. What is the latest move by the Trump White House today?
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So today, the White House confirmed that President Trump is sending around 1,500 active duty troops to the southern border to help secure it. And a new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, in his first gaggle with reporters today, told us that it shows that President Trump is fulfilling his campaign promise. Watch.
This is something President Trump campaigned on. The American people have been waiting for such a time. President Trump is sending a very strong message to people around this world. If you are thinking about breaking the laws of the United States of America, you will be returned home, you will be arrested, you will be prosecuted. Do not come.
And the White House says Wednesday's deployment order is based on an executive order President Trump signed on Monday that directs the Defense Department to make Homeland Security a core mission of the agency. And President Trump on Monday also signed other executive orders about the border, including declaring a national emergency over illegal immigration, as well as tasking the U.S. military with border security. Here's Trump talking about his actions on day one. Watch.
And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country.
Sir, this is an executive order entitled Protecting the American People Against Invasion, which again deals with the southern border.
Meanwhile, the newly sent active troops will join the already 2,500 troops at the border, and they are National Guards as well as reserve forces. Back to you.
And Iris, sending active troops to the border is a significant move. Has it ever been done before?
Right, that's a great question. Actually, both President Trump during his first administration as well as President Biden under the last administration have made similar moves by sending troops, active duty troops, to the border. But they were doing mostly administrative work, as under U.S. law, active duty troops are prohibited from doing law enforcement work, which includes, for example, detaining or arresting individuals at the border. But that's unless the president invokes the Insurrection Act, which Trump actually in his Monday order says remains possible if the Defense Department finds it necessary. Tiff.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. And we have more updates from the school shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. A gunman killed one student and wounded another before killing himself. Police say a 17-year-old male student opened fire in the cafeteria at Antioch High School at around 11 a.m. local time. The shots killed one 16-year-old female student. Another student suffered a grazing wound and has been released from the hospital after receiving treatment. The gunman was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police say the situation has been contained. They are looking into a motive and whether the students who were shot were targeted. State and federal authorities are responding to the incident. President Trump's White House said it is monitoring the situation. President Trump's pick for OMB director testified today before the Senate Budget Committee as part of his confirmation process. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the details.
While Office of Management and Budget may not be a household term, the agency's work is profoundly one that impacts their lives. If confirmed, I will continue to serve with the best interests of at their heart, to serve and strive to ensure every decision contributes to a more prosperous future for all Americans.
That was Russell Vought during his opening remarks before senators at his confirmation hearing. Mr. Vought is President Trump's pick to be the next director of the Office of Management and Budget, a title he previously held during Trump's first administration.
We have to use taxpayer dollars wisely because inflation driven by irresponsible federal spending taxes Americans twice. The average American household has lost roughly $2,000 of purchasing powers just since January 2021.
Mr. Vought has promised to follow what he calls the president's mandate to reform the federal bureaucracy and make it more cost efficient.
$3 million for girl-centric climate action in Brazil. $10 billion in maintaining, leasing, and furnishing empty federal government buildings. $12 million for a pickleball complex in Las Vegas. $4.8 million for social media influencers in Ukraine.
Republican senators have backed Mr. Vought, who has already been cleared by the Senate's Homeland Security Committee on a party-line vote. Democratic senators have vowed to oppose his nomination.
GAO also found that under your leadership, OMB violated the law by withholding vital security assistance to Ukraine that Congress explicitly provided, putting our national security at risk.
Senate Democrats grilled Mr. Vought on the president's use of the Impoundment Control Act, a law that prohibits the executive from withholding congressionally approved funds.
The forgotten men and women of this country, those who work hard every day in cities and towns across this country, deserve a government that empowers them to achieve their dreams.
Mr. Vought has previously served as the executive director of the Republican Study Committee and also as a policy director of the House Republican Conference, as well as serving in President Trump's first administration. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And an update on another Trump cabinet pick. The Senate Commerce Committee voted unanimously today to advance Transportation Secretary nominee Shen Duffy. He will head to a full Senate vote. Leaders on Capitol Hill spoke to the press this morning for the first time since President Trump's inauguration and flurry of executive orders. Republicans optimistically lay out their next legislative moves, while Democrats condemn Trump's first actions. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Republicans celebrating their new trifecta portray optimism for the days ahead.
But people are smiling, right? They're in a good mood.
Leadership is now gearing up to pass a massive bill to implement new policies on energy, taxes, and border security.
Having gotten this sort of once-in-a-generation opportunity with unified government, there's a lot of anticipation about what will be in that bill, and there's a lot of discussion, healthy debate right now inside.
The bill will codify Trump's day one executive actions Democrats say are unhelpful at the very least.
A lot of the decisions, including this one that Donald Trump did on day one, don't do anything to address real issues that Americans are facing.
Doing a preventative pardon of members of Congress who served on January 6th committee is not the same as pardoning 1,500 people who committed crimes, some of them who assaulted police officers violently.
As for the week ahead, Republicans will push the Born Alive bill to require doctors to try to save the lives of babies born alive during an abortion attempt.
If a child is born alive during an attempted abortion and is crying and struggling to breathe on the operating table, should the doctor try to keep that child alive? Or should the doctor deny that crying newborn child medical care?
Having us vote on a bill that continues to undermine women's access to health care. For me, that's unacceptable, and it's frankly not what I was sent here to work on.
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio outlined several changes happening at the State Department, including a focus on ending mass immigration and de-emphasizing DEI. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Newly sworn-in Secretary of State Marco Rubio is signaling many changes for the State Department, all of which line up with some of Trump's roughly 200 new executive orders. In a memo released Wednesday, Rubio outlined changes including ending programs related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. This follows the Trump administration's order to place all federal DEI employees on paid leave and remove related websites and social media accounts. Rubio said a primary focus of the State Department will be to secure the southern border and to stop the department from facilitating or encouraging mass migration. Now, this includes negotiating with other countries' leaders on repatriating illegal immigrants.
In our republic, the voters decide the course of our nation, both domestically and abroad. And they have elected Donald J. Trump as our president when it comes to foreign policy on a very clear mission. And that mission is to ensure that our foreign policy is centered on one thing, and that is the advancement of our national interest, which they have clearly defined through his campaign as anything that makes us stronger or safer or more prosperous.
Another goal outlined by Rubio is to stop the censorship and suppression of information. He said the State Department's effort to counter propaganda has, quote, expanded and fundamentally changed since the Cold War era, and that changes are coming to end any federal programs that censor Americans. And finally, Rubio said that the State Department must do away with the climate policies that, quote, weaken America. Now, this coincides with President Trump's executive orders to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, overturn a Biden-era pause on exports of liquid natural gas, and increase domestic oil supply.
There will be changes, but the changes are not meant to be destructive. They're not meant to be punitive. Some of the issues that confront humanity today have no precedent. They have no historic precedent. Some of the challenges we face have no historic precedent.
These comments signify a major and immediate change from how the last administration led the State Department to now. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And the House earlier today gave final approval to the Laken-Riley Act. The bipartisan bill now heads to President Trump's desk for signature. The final vote was 263 to 156. Dozens of Democrats joined Republicans to approve the amended version of the bill they received from the Senate. The act requires the detainment of illegal immigrants accused of burglary, larceny, theft, shoplifting, and violent crimes. It also allows states to sue the federal government over immigration policies. This marks the first piece of legislation that Trump can sign as president. Coming up, how much weight do President Trump's new executive orders carry? Chris Beers brings us an in-depth look into how these tools of the executive branch work and their limitations. President Trump tells Russia to take the easy way out of the Ukraine war before the situation gets worse for Moscow. Aaron Pazdar has details on how Trump could get Russia to strike a deal. And Israeli forces target terrorists during a major counterterrorism operation in the West Bank. This comes as Trump's envoy says he'll be in the region to oversee the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry reports when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump's executive orders carry weight, but they aren't set in stone. NTD's Chris Beers looks at how these tools of the executive branch work and their limitations.
President Trump signing more executive orders on his first day in office than any other president in recent decades. It's time to take a closer look at how these actually work. That's why I spoke with senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Hans von Spakovsky.
Executive orders are not like laws passed by Congress. They are simply directives from the president to federal agencies and federal employees in his authority as commander-in-chief and chief operating officer, chief executive of the United States government. It's simply his direction on how those federal agencies should carry out their responsibilities.
The powers of the president are outlined in Article 2 of the Constitution, which says the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America, and that the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Supreme Court cases have also validated the right of U.S. presidents to issue executive orders.
Now, these only go to the executive branch of the federal government, but they can have widespread effects. I mean, the best example of that is obviously when the president is directing the Department of Homeland Security in how to enforce our federal immigration laws. That, of course, affects immigration across the country. It affects border security.
President Trump issued multiple executive orders related to border security on day one. These include declaring a national emergency at the southern border, reinstituting the Remain in Mexico policy from his first term, and designating Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. These orders can be challenged in court. Take Trump's executive order from his first term that restricted people from countries considered state sponsors of terror.
The U.S. Supreme Court said he did have the authority, not only because of his role in as commander-in-chief and therefore responsible for the national security of the country, but also under specific federal immigration laws that gave him the authority to shut down the border.
Court challenges to a president's executive order don't always play out in the president's favor. Let's take a look at former President Joe Biden's order commanding federal agencies to forgive federal student loan debt.
The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that he did not have the authority to do that. He had no inherent constitutional authority, and the statute setting up federal student loans did not give the president the power to forgive those loans.
While citizens unaffected by an executive order can't challenge it, Congress has some indirect recourse.
You know, if the president issues an executive order telling staff in a particular department to take certain actions, Congress can, in the appropriations for that department, say no funding can be used to carry out the president's actions on that issue.
Also, an executive order can be revoked by a later president.
So if you want to have permanent change, particularly inside the executive branch, in addition to issuing an executive order on it, the president then has to do everything he can to get that cemented into law.
Trump can only do that with the help of Congress. Chris Beers, NTD News.
President Trump is threatening Russia with taxes, tariffs, and more if the Ukraine war doesn't end soon. Trump tells Russia to take the easy way out before the situation gets worse for Moscow. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the Ukraine update.
And people are getting killed.
President Trump, during his first week in office, telling Russia to stop the fighting in Ukraine. On Wednesday morning, Trump posted, "If we don't make a deal soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various other participating countries." He added that we can do it the easy way or the hard way, and the easy way is always better. And just a few hours prior, on Tuesday night, Trump said he's looking to meet with the presidents of both countries involved in the conflict.
We're talking to Zelensky. We're going to be talking with President Putin very soon, and we'll see how it all happens.
And Trump also talked about the aid the U.S. is sending to Ukraine, taking a hit at the European Union.
The European Union should be paying a lot more than they're paying because under Biden, I mean, we're in there for $200 billion more. Now, it affects them more than it affects us. We have an ocean in between, right?
On Wednesday, the foreign policy chief of the European Union responded to Trump's comments.
We have given more than 134 billion euros to Ukraine. That makes us the biggest international donor of Ukraine.
But according to the Special Inspector General in charge of Ukraine aid, the U.S. is giving more. Its website states that America's Ukraine funding totals almost $183 billion as of September 2024. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is at the meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos. He talked about having European peacekeepers in the country after the conflict ends.
200,000, it's a minimum. It's a minimum. Otherwise, it's nothing.
Zelensky says the large number of peacekeepers is needed because Russia's army is twice the size of Ukraine's.
Because if they have 1.5 million army, and if we will have less 2 times, it meant that we need contingents with a very strong number of soldiers.
He added that Russia could simply attack again in the future if Ukraine can't defend itself. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Israeli forces have launched a major counterterrorism operation in the West Bank. This comes as a ceasefire still holds in the Gaza Strip. President Trump's envoy said he'll be in the region to make sure the ceasefire goes as planned. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
The Israel Defense Forces, the Israeli Security Agency, and the Israel Border Police are conducting a large-scale counterterrorism operation in the West Bank. On Wednesday, Israeli forces reported hitting 10 terrorists in the past 24 hours and also dismantling numerous explosives that terrorists planted along the routes and even launching aerial strikes on terror infrastructure. One resident said Israeli forces used drones to tell residents to leave the neighborhood, and then they detained them.
They asked about the situation inside the camp and told me people shoot towards us inside the camp. I told him I don't know anyone. I was staying at home. I only heard bombs and rockets. We couldn't leave home.
We were at home, then we left. The Israeli army coordinated with the medics. Thank God we are safe. They let us cross.
These latest operations in the West Bank come while a ceasefire is currently underway in the Gaza Strip. Israel released a video on Wednesday of troops leaving the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, since the ceasefire began, trucks carrying humanitarian aid have continued to pour into the Gaza Strip, as some residents are seen trying to grab the aid from the moving trucks and scrambling for what they could get their hands on. But how long will the ceasefire last? Many are worried that the ceasefire will collapse, including this woman whose son was captured from his tank on October 7th and taken hostage back to the Gaza Strip.
That's such a long time to be in captivity. Such a long time for us as a family to wait for our son Nimrod to return. And now these days, the deal is being implemented, and this is just the first phase of the deal. And from what we know, the next phases are still not finalized.
However, Israel and Hamas are set to resume talks in just over a week to work out the second phase. And that phase is supposed to include the release of all remaining hostages, living and dead, and a permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. And in the meantime, Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, said he'll be part of a team of, quote, outside overseers deployed in and along the Gaza Strip. He said the team will ensure safety during the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And we have a breaking news update tied to the Middle East. President Trump just signed an executive order designating the Houthis in Yemen as a terrorist organization. Trump said the Houthis threaten Americans in the Middle East, America's regional partners, and global maritime trade. He said the U.S. will work with regional partners to eliminate the Houthis' capabilities and operations. A historic winter storm is causing the usual dangers like slippery roads and power outages. It's giving air travelers the usual headaches, with hundreds of flight delays today and a couple thousand yesterday. But this storm is also unusual. Meteorologists are calling it a generational event. That's because it's happening in some of the southernmost areas of the country. Here's a look at Americans experiencing snow for the very first time.
My first snowball!
A once-in-a-generation winter storm in the far south is delighting some people who have never seen snow.
I've never seen snow falling. I'm like a little kid right now.
Brutal cold is the reason for the storm in Gulf Coast states and the southeast. Most winter weather alerts are expiring or expired by now, but not without making history first. Southern Louisiana has its first ever blizzard warning in the history books after yesterday.
We can do this in NOLA!
The New Orleans airport reports 8 inches of snowfall. That's more than 3 times the previous modern record.
I'm like, dang, it feels like Christmas. Like, I'm from Texas, so it don't snow like that down here. It don't snow. It barely even snows. So seeing all this snow is something like new. It's magical to me.
Florida likely has a new all-time statewide snowfall record.
This is a blizzard in terms of Florida weather.
Parts of Georgia, Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama are covered in white too. And it's not just humans in awe of the snow. Some animals also seem to be experiencing it for the first time.
She didn't like the snow at first, but now she loves it. She just licks it off the ground, as y'all can see.
Another wildfire is blazing through California, burning thousands of acres and forcing evacuations. As the region faces escalating wildfire risks, homeowners are exploring new ways to protect their properties. NTD's Christina Corona tells us the latest.
The ongoing wildfire crisis in Los Angeles has escalated with the eruption of the Hughes Fire near Lake Hughes Road on Wednesday morning. The fire quickly spread, growing to over 5,000 acres near Cascaic and prompting widespread evacuations. As of Wednesday afternoon, the fire was 0% contained. Meanwhile, other fires in the region are showing progress. The Palisades fire is currently 68% contained, the Eaton fire is 91% contained, and the Lilac fire in San Diego is 90% contained. In response to the fires, President Trump announced Tuesday that he plans to issue an executive order aimed at increasing water access for firefighters. As wildfires spread, California residents are seeking ways to protect their homes. One innovation is a fire retardant spray that adds an extra layer of protection for homes and nearby vegetation. To find out how they use this product, I spoke with Paul Reynolds, VP of Fire and Safety Services at the Patriot Group, a utility services contractor specializing in fire prevention.
Yeah, we mix a Komodo product. It's 4 parts water, 1 part the retardant. We mix it and we have fire pumps and tanks on our trucks, and then we spray it. It's best on vegetation, but it can be applied to the home as well. And it just helps. It's another added layer of defense against wildfires.
Reynolds explained that the product was applied nearly 4 days ago to St. Martin of Tours Catholic Church in Brentwood, where some members of the church and school community lost their homes in the Pacific Palisades fire.
We applied it to the roof and all the vegetation. The walls were brick, so not a whole lot of need there. Anywhere where an ember can sit and catch or leaves would collect, that could start a fire to where it could sneak through the brick.
The Patriot Group recently partnered with Komodo Fire Systems to apply an extra layer of protection using Komodo's environmentally friendly and non-toxic fire retardant solutions.
It's non-toxic, it's not harmful to humans or animals, and it's okay to be in waterways. It won't kill fish, and it won't wilt your plants or kill the trees or anything like that.
Komodo Fire Systems products can be applied to various materials, including foam, plastic, fabric, wood, paper, and metals. Reynolds said if applied after the last rain in June, the spray remains effective until 4 inches of rainfall. It can also be rinsed off if needed. Meanwhile, local authorities are preparing for rain this weekend, which could help reduce fire risks, but also bring the threat of dangerous ash runoff and flooding, particularly in areas like Pacific Palisades.
We are beginning in a proactive way in anticipation of rain to make sure that if rain does come, that it doesn't add further to the crisis that we've been in. There's a lot of hazardous materials, toxics that could go into the ocean. We want to prevent that.
Bass ordered crews to clear vegetation, stabilize hillsides, install barriers, and reinforce roads ahead of possible mud and debris flows this weekend. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, the president is ending what he's calling discriminatory DEI policies in the federal government. He's also declaring that new federal buildings will follow classical design styles. Jason Blair has the update. And Dr. Carol Swain joins us to dive into Trump's actions on DEI and how DEI initiatives under Biden have impacted the federal government. That and more after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump ends federal DEI practices, issuing several statements and executive orders. He also reintroduces an order to promote classical and traditional federal architecture. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
President Donald Trump ends, quote, illegal discrimination in the federal government and is restoring, quote, merit-based opportunity. All federal DEI employees have been put on paid leave, and all related websites and social media accounts are to close down by 5 p.m. on Wednesday. An executive order from the White House says hardworking Americans who deserve a shot at the American dream should not be stigmatized, demeaned, or shut out of opportunities because of their race or sex. Senators Tim Kaine and John Kennedy commented on Trump's move.
And I think this DEI leave is just another example of kind of cruelty and pettiness.
I think the American people have spoken very clearly that the best way to stop discriminating against people on the basis of race or gender is to stop discriminating against people on the basis of race and gender.
The White House says that these DEI policies also diminish the importance of individual merit and aptitude when selecting people for jobs, which the administration says can threaten people's safety, especially in sectors like medical, aviation, and law enforcement. The president also ordered all agencies to enforce our longstanding civil rights laws and to combat illegal private sector DEI preferences, mandates, policies, programs, and activities. Many private companies have already announced ending or overhauling their DEI policies, such as Meta, Amazon, and Ford. The Trump administration says it wants to restore, quote, the values of individual dignity, hard work, and excellence. President Trump also issued an executive order to return to more traditional design styles for federal buildings. The order is titled Promoting Beautiful Federal Civic Architecture. The order seeks to, quote, beautify public spaces and ennoble the United States. The memorandum declares that federal buildings should, quote, respect regional, traditional, and classical architectural heritage. This is a reintroduction of one Trump issued in 2020 towards the end of his first term. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Joining us now to dive into Trump's actions against DEI is Dr. Carol Swain, Distinguished Senior Fellow for Constitutional Studies at Texas Public Policy Foundation and retired Professor of Political Science and Law at Vanderbilt University. Dr. Swain, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you with us. Now to begin, Trump issued a pointed and sweeping executive order to eliminate DEI-focused policies and programs within the federal government. How expansive was the previous administration's push for DEI within the federal government?
I mean, clearly the Biden administration and also our nation as a whole had moved too far away from the civil rights laws, especially the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. And the president also pretty much eliminated race-based affirmative action, an executive order that Johnson had put in place in 1965. President Trump issued an executive order ending affirmative action as we know it today. And so it was wide. It is something that will have a tremendous impact on businesses as well as federal contractors. I also believe that it was the right thing to do. In 2023, I published a book, The Adversity of Diversity, and I argued that the Supreme Court's decision to end race-based affirmative action in college admissions would doom DEI programs. And so DEI is out the door, and so is race-based affirmative action.
And in his executive order, Trump said, quote, we will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. How would you say DEI policy has impacted the culture and goals of the U.S. government?
Well, it's not just, it has impacted our entire society. And I believe it's lowered standards, that it's hurt racial and ethnic minorities as well as other groups. And in a country that is as racially and ethnically diverse as America, you cannot have race-based policies. There are about 8 states that are either majority minority or they will soon be. There's no way you can favor one racial or ethnic group above another. And affirmative action also impacts other areas, other groups. It's not just race, but also religion, women, national origin. So there are other things that will be impacted by the end of DEI programs. And I think the left overplayed its hand, especially with the aggressive policies that related to the LGBTQ community. By executive order, they were included, and they just pushed Americans too far. But what we're doing is getting back to the civil rights laws that are on the books and our Constitution's Equal Protection Clause.
And Dr. Swain, there are a number of people out there who say the system doesn't always work in their favor, that hard work doesn't pay off as long as systemic problems like prejudice exist. What would you say about their concerns?
I would say that the system was working before we got aggressive DEI programs. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was absolutely needed. And after that, we moved towards a system where the focus was on non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and outreach. And in my book, The Adversity of Diversity, I talked about the system that I grew up in when I came of age. And I think that benefited a lot of people. You got your foot in the door, you got equal opportunity, but you had to work, you had to prove yourself. And there was a search for talented minorities. President Trump did not eliminate the executive order that encourages businesses to engage in non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and outreach. And that helps us to be in compliance with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as our nation's Equal Protection Clause. There's lots of opportunities in America. This is not the 1960s. We are at a new point in America, and I think that we'll all be okay if we treat everyone equally under the law.
And expanding on that, you wrote on X today that the elimination of affirmative action takes us back to the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause, that we can have diverse workplaces and institutions by following, quote, the laws of the land. Talk to us about that.
I mean, it speaks for itself. I believe that what has happened has been a tremendous lowering of standards that's hurt racial and ethnic minorities, especially people who worked hard to accomplish certain goals. Their attainments have been diminished by the fact that others were slipped in just because they belong to a particular group. And it's not just about race, it's also about sexual orientation, the LGBTQ groups. What we have seen with the Obama administration and the Biden administration and the pressure on corporations, they have brought in too many people, and they've set up all these DEI programs so that they can say they have diverse workforces. And it's created a very divisive situation in workplaces, at colleges and universities. And I think that once you eliminate the DEI programs, the people who are qualified that hold those positions, they will do fine. They will find jobs where they are valued because of who they are and what they do, not their race and their ethnicity, but the talents that they bring to the workplace. And so this is a step forward for America, and it's happening at the right time. Again, this is not the 1960s. This is 2025. We've had affirmative action for more than 60 years. Our country has never been more diverse. And so this is the time for us to move ahead, get back to first things. The first things are non-discrimination, equal opportunity, outreach, and compliance with the civil rights laws of our nation. That is what will make our nation strong.
Dr. Carol Swain, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn calls Shen a brilliant way to show the true culture of China. We have more from St. Petersburg, Florida. And in the NFL, the New York Jets have reportedly hired a new head coach. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A testimony to the true nature of what China could be. That's what former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn said after watching Shen in Florida. NTD is a proud media sponsor of Shen and was in St. Petersburg. Let's take a look.
This is my first time seeing it, and I was absolutely inspired. I think it's a miracle, actually. It's a very a brilliant way to show the true culture of China. What I found was Shen Yun was really a testimony to the true nature of what China could be if they were given an opportunity to be free, an opportunity to have a true culture, a true Chinese culture that goes back thousands and thousands of years and could be an inspiration to many other parts of our world.
Shen Performing Arts brought 5,000 years of China's divinely inspired culture to life in St. Petersburg, Florida. Its mission to revive 5,000 years of traditional Chinese beauty, majesty, and culture through classical dance in a live orchestra combining Chinese and Western musical instruments.
And I think what Shen Yun does is it takes, in a couple of hours, it takes 5,000 years and brings it to life. There was 10 or 12 different stories that were told there. Each one of them was totally different, but they all blended together in this beautiful culture that I think that the American people need to see more of. Certainly America, and I think the rest of the world.
China was once known as the land of the divine. Each Shen production carries a message of heaven, harmony, and spirituality, values deeply rooted in traditional Chinese culture. As a result, Shen is unable to perform in China as the communist regime seeks to destroy these traditions.
I think it's terrible. I think it's disgraceful. They should embrace Chinese culture, but the Chinese Communist Party does not. They want to try to have it viewed from one very narrow lens, through one very narrow lens, and it's the lens of this faithless society. And one of the things that comes out of Shen Yun is a very strong, it's a powerful, powerful sentiment of faith. And I think that's something, and in fact, I know that the Chinese Communist Party wants nothing to do with faith.
Along with stories from the past, the company also highlights human rights abuses happening under the Chinese Communist Party's rule in modern day, including forced organ harvesting on members of faith groups.
It was a really exceptional way that they brought out this persecution and how, people who are just trying to live their daily lives are being persecuted for no reason, really. The Shen Yun did an amazing job of highlighting that. And I was, I enjoyed those parts because it brought to me, kind of brought it home to me that what Shen Yun is doing for not just the American people, but doing for the world.
Since its inception in 2006, Shen has expanded from 1 to 8 companies, which tour the globe simultaneously, showcasing traditional Chinese culture from before communism. Recently, the New York Times has released reports that attempt to paint the dance company in a negative light. Flynn expressed his concern.
Why? You have to ask why. Why is a major United States newspaper working with the Chinese Communist Party to attack this beautiful piece of art, this art form of culture of what China could be? I believe that in the next few years here, I think we're going to see another shift in our country embracing the true Chinese culture. And I think that the people that want to see change in China and change of the Chinese Communist Party, I admire what Shen Yun is doing for the world to show the world what a true China can be. And I think that's remarkable.
NTD News, St. Petersburg, Florida.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in the NFL as your Jets have reportedly hired Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn as their head coach. Why do you think they went with him?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons. One, he's worked his way up the coaching ladder. When he took over as defensive coordinator for the Lions, 4 years ago, he inherited a defense that was ranked 32nd out of 32 teams in the NFL, dead last. This last year, they worked up to number 7. He also, though, he has a connection with the Jets. He was actually their first-round pick back in 1994. played defensive back for them for 8 years. 3 of those were actually under Bill Parcells. This guy made several Pro Bowls too. Now the funny thing is, he was actually on the wrong end of that infamous Dan Marino fake spike play back in 1994. Everyone thought Marino was going to spike it to stop the clock. Instead, he faked it. Then he hit Mark Ingram for the winning touchdown with 20 seconds left. Glenn was one guarding Ingram, though it should be noted he wasn't actually faked out. He actually played defense. It was just a great throw by Marino. But anyway, back to right now. Glenn comes into a very interesting scenario with the Jets. They have plenty of talent, but someone is going to have to decide whether to bring back Aaron Rodgers as well as Devontae Adams on offense. He'll probably have some say in that, and I definitely hope as a Jets fan that they do.
Looking at tennis news, world number 2 Iga Swiatek has rolled into the semifinals with another dominating performance last night. Who's her next opponent here?
Yeah, that's going to be American Madison Keys next. That's going to be in the semifinals tomorrow. But you're right, she's been very dominant this far. She has not dropped a set in these 5 matches so far. In fact, she's only dropped 14 games total, and 7 of those are actually in the opener. The last time someone reached the semifinals while losing fewer than 15 games in the process, that was Maria Sharapova a dozen years ago. Now, this dominance really shouldn't be that surprising given that Swiatek is ranked number 2 in the world, like you said, but she's yet to win the Australian Open title. She's better at the French Open where they have the clay courts. She's won that 4 times. This is the farthest she's actually reached here. Now, the other women's semifinal match, we have top-ranked Arina Sabalenka against the number 11 seed Paula Badosa. Those 2 matches are going to take place tomorrow morning, at least U.S. time tomorrow morning.
Well, shifting gears to baseball, the Dodgers have announced their deal with prized Japanese pitcher Roki Sasaki. What does he bring to the team that made him such a sought-after player?
You know, a lot of things, but he's only 23. That's probably the biggest thing, his youth. What he displayed there over in Japan probably makes him the #1 prospect in baseball. And the Dodgers only had to pay him a $6 million signing bonus. Now, had he been 25 or older, he could have commanded a 9-figure contract like his now teammate Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He has like a $300 million contract. The Dodgers are really the favorites to win the division next season, but with or without him. But they just got a major piece to keep them as favorites, probably for quite some time. Sasaki's splitter was rated as one of the best in the world by Baseball America. His fastball is already in the high 90s. Basically, the rich got richer with this deal. You know, players want to play for the winner. The Dodgers have been a winner for more than a decade, really. They are the defending World Series champions. Word has it they'll be using a 6-man pitching rotation this year, which is unusual. Most people do 5. But the Dodgers, they already signed Blake Snell this offseason. Plus they have Yamamoto, now Sasaki. Plus they have Tyler Glass now, and Shohei Ohtani is going to be pitching next year too. There's 5 very good pitchers, and we haven't even mentioned Clayton Kershaw possibly coming back. So it is safe to say that they are loaded.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.